Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4361-400-646. This is a single acting spring hinge. Okay, so the LB, let's dissect the part number. The LB stands for lube bearing. It's a maintenance-free construction type of concealed bearing specific to Bommer. The 4361 is, it means a number of things. In summary, it means the profile of this hinge, meaning that you've got a square corner on one leaf, you've got a radius corner on the other. You've got the specific location of the holes for the hinge screws, and screws are included in the complementary finish. All wood screws and all metal screws, actually. It also is a reference to the leaf thickness, which is 96 thousandths. So LB 4361 means specifically this shape of hinge with this exact profile of holes and the corner treatment. And what that really connects to is typically a door manufacturer. Okay, your door might say a number of names on it. The LB4361 happens to be the Castlegate pattern hinge. The hinge pattern that Castlegate uses is this, in general. If there's any, if you're not sure, if there's any guesswork involved, just refer to that template, and you'll be able to determine if the existing hinge you have, provided this is a replacement, and it generally is, matches where these holes are located. Now the 400 in the part number means that it's 4 inch tall and 4 inch wide. And the height is the first dimension on a hinge like this. The 646 means two things. First, it means it's a steel-based hinge in a satin nickel finish. So all of the common finishes are certainly available: brass, bronze, chromes, oil rubbed, black japanned, prime coat, zinc, a number of finishes, polished satin and all that stuff generally. Being a spring hinge, it's intended to actually, obviously close the door behind you. This hinge, being a 4x4, it is compatible with standard hinges because the vertical axis of pivoting would be compliant with a standard non-spring loaded hinge. And what that means is you can mix and match this hinge with a standard hinge, meaning your application may not call for all spring hinges. It might call for 2 spring hinges. Now, speaking of the quantity of spring hinges, I am a fan of all spring hinges, and it's not for the obvious reason. It's for the reason that I have found over years of installing, adjusting, readjusting, troubleshooting spring hinges, that the more spring hinges on a door equate to a more predictable and reliable sort of door operation. Here's what I mean. When the door opens, energy is stored in that spring, and that spring is just like the spring on your garage door. As that door opens, there's tension, released. As it closes, tension is stored, so that when it comes time for the spring to do its job and release its energy, it will have the door begin to close. But that spring hinge has a lot of work that it has to do. It has to overcome the weight of the door, the width of the door, the air pressure as it will encounter it as it tries to close the door, and then lastly, the amount of friction that the latch bolt creates when it hits the strike plate. I have found when you've got less spring hinges rather than more, you end up needing to set the tension very high just to get the door moving, and then hopefully by inertia alone it will get all the way closed. And that tension set so high that you can sometimes hear a creaking in the hinge, which is evidence that the spring is being used beyond what it's designed for. Or it could be that it's got a small amount of surface oxidation. If the hinge is very old, you can lubricate inside those joints there to help alleviate that. But in a new installation, if you hear any sound, it's definitely too much of a tension setting. And by the way, 3 holes when we get to setting tension is all that is the maximum required. I have found that more spring hinges equates to a safer amount of operation because there's more stored energy, not only to get the door started and closed, but to have enough energy left in those springs to get it to latch. And that's really the bottom line. You might have a door that's fire rated. And if it's a fire rated door, there are two obligations that the spring hinge has to meet if it's closing the door. It has to be self-closing, but it also has to be self-latching. And if it's not both, then it's not a fire rated door anymore. So having more spring hinges is like a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And that's my analogy for more spring hinges rather than less. There is a guideline below this video on the link called Certifications and Hinge Selection Guide. If your order comes in a box, and it possibly will, it'll be printed on the back of the box. But if you don't get a box with the hinge, you might order one hinge and we don't send it to you in a box. The information is there. You can see from that guideline that if you're dealing with doors that are up to 85 pounds, they want 2 spring hinges and a regular hinge. Doors 110 pounds, 3 spring hinges. Now, if you've got a 30-pound door, certainly 1 spring hinge is probably going to do the job very well. And keeping in mind they're not exceeding 3 foot by 7 foot. But with how weather will change on an annual basis, the settings you might have on a spring hinge in the summer will be different than the winter. The back door of the 3-flat condo building might be, or the windows may be open, and then the air pressure will change as the air comes through the building, requiring generally less spring tension. The final thing to say about that is more springs equal more control, more ability to control over that door. I'm not a fan of spring hinges closing a door because I don't think they're the proper piece of hardware to control a door. Hydraulic control, like a surface door closer, floor closer, overhead concealed closer, to me is a better way to control it. But there are instances when that's thoroughly impractical. The front door of a house is not going to have a hydraulic door closer on it. So spring hinges are there to solve that condition. Now, certainly every order will come with a tension pin, and that's that steel pin that you see there. It will also, every hinge will come with a tension pin. Every order will come with a tension rod. So what happens is setting the hinge tension, when the tension collar is pointed towards the top, and if you install it upside down, just turn it the opposite way, but turn it clockwise, and as you do so, you reveal new additional holes as you turn it clockwise, and it's into one of those new holes that you insert the tension pin. 3 holes maximum. And that's how you set the tension. So you'll set it, test your door operation, make your adjustments, higher, lower, whatever the case might be, and proceed from there. Install the hinge, the spring hinge, top hinge first, then go to the middle, and then lastly the third sort of hinge. Again, Castlegate, this is going to be compatible with doors and frames made to those specifications. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo. Right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer LB4361-400-646 single-acting spring hinge for Castlegate doors and frames, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.